Part 75. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 742. Chen Huang shook his head and said regretfully, "That's such a pity." Tang Ning coughed dryly and said, "Emotional matters cannot be forced after all. State affairs are important." Emperor Chen still felt a little regretful and said, "If you can capture Sushan Khan, I won't have to worry about the grassland matter at all." Tang Ning didn't know why Chen Huang always wanted him to take down Wan Yanyan. His logic didn't work at all. Even if Wei Nianyan becomes the wife of the Tang family and the grassland is no longer surnamed Wanyan, her surname is still Tang. What does it have to do with the Zhao family? Of course, such treacherous words cannot be said. Tang Ning remembered something, raised her head and said, "Your Majesty, before I leave, the four princesses want Chen Guo to help them form a heavy cavalry. I dare not make the decision without authorization. I hereby request your Majesty's instructions." Emperor Chen frowned and asked, "Why do they want to ride again?" Tang Ning explained, "Your Majesty, you don't know. The Sushan people are on the grassland, and there is also a powerful enemy, the Black Man. The Black Man is deep in the grassland, and their combat power is still higher than that of the Sushan clan. If Sushan is defeated by the Black Man, if it is destroyed, our country, Chen, will face a greater threat than before. Help them build heavy cavalry." Chen Huang murmured, frowning, and said, "I know, I will consider this matter." Based on Tang Ning's understanding of Chen Huang, as long as he didn't refuse him face to face, they were inseparable. The court had just calmed down the wolf, and a fierce tiger jumped out. The court was definitely not willing to see it. What they would rather do was drive the tiger away and devour the wolf, or raise the wolf to defend against the tiger. They would not face these two head-on. Of a ferocious beast. In order to prevent Hyman from continuing to grow in power, supporting the Sushan tribe is almost a certainty. Emperor Chen didn't mention the matter for the time being. He looked at Tang Ning and asked, "You have made such great achievements this time. How do you want me to reward you?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "Although I have made merit first, I did not report it when I entered the capital. I am guilty later. Now my merit and demerit are equal to each other. I dare not take any more credit." Emperor Chen looked at him and said, "You can go down first. When the army is in full swing, I will discuss your merits and reward them one by one." Tang Ning cupped her hands and said, "I'm leaving." Tang Ning walked out of the courtyard. Chen Huang clasped his hands behind his back and sighed, "Retreat in order to advance and protect yourself wisely." He is only in his early 20s, but he has actually learned the skills of those old foxes in the court. Wei Jian smiled and said, 3 years ago, when Mr. Tang first entered Beijing, he showed his sharpness. Now that he is in a high position, he has learned to restrain his sharpness. I think this is growth." Chen Huang glanced at him and asked, "You mean, I am an incompetent and foolish king, and I am worried that his great achievements will overwhelm the master, and he will do the same thing, and the rabbit will die and the dog will cook it?" Wei Jian smiled and said calmly, "Your Majesty has misunderstood. What the old slave means is that Mr. Tang also knows that the beauty of a tree will be destroyed by the wind. When he reaches his position, if he takes another step forward, he will below one person, above 10,000 people. He is still young. There is still a long way to go in the future. Taking one step at a time is the right way. If the steps are too big, it is easy to pull the crotch. If I turn a blind eye to my ministers who have made such great achievements, and refuse to confer titles or rewards, how would I be any different from a foolish emperor?" Emperor Chen smiled coldly and said, "I want to see which evil wind dares to blow." Tang Ning walked out of the small courtyard. Su'aryu's Honggai and the others had been waiting outside for a long time. Zhongyi came up to him with a worried look on his face and asked, "Mr. Sir, your Majesty has not punished you, has he?" "Don't worry," Tang Ning smiled and said, Your Majesty is not a jealous woman, so how could you convict an important minister for these things? Zhongyi was relieved, then glanced at him and said, Master, please don't talk nonsense. Your Majesty will really be the one to blame if he hears it. Tang Ning nodded repeatedly and said, Okay, it's getting late, let's go back. Emperor Chen refused to wait in the palace and insisted on going out for a wander. The atmosphere of the autumn outing was completely ruined by him. Fortunately, Zhao Man had been staying in the palace during this period and didn't know he was back. If she came here today, Tang Ning would really be unable to argue. Speaking of Zhao Man, she had learned from Zhongyi about the rumors circulating in the capital in the days after Tang Ning left the capital. Princess Yi Yang is indeed a petty woman. She started stirring up trouble in the capital as soon as Tang Ning left. Unfortunately, before he left, he had already settled matters in the capital. Mr. Xiao intervened, and Princess Yi Yang was demoted. As the Princess of Yi Yang, she is currently meditating on her past in a Taoist temple outside the city. In this incident, the mysterious man hiding in the dark appeared again. Tang Ning didn't know who the person with the ugly calligraphy was, but judging from his several handwritings, he didn't seem to have any ill intentions towards the Tang family. In addition, in the days since he left Beijing, nothing major happened in Beijing. There were only a few things worth mentioning. The dispute between King Duan and King Kong has long come to an end. King Duan has been keeping a low profile in recent days. He only ended his cold treatment 2 months ago. Then he directly claimed to be ill in the palace and did not participate in court affairs. He has not done anything in recent days. The Tang family's method of staying the same to cope with all changes was indeed the most suitable for King Duan. He was already an invisible prince. All that was missing was an imperial edict from Emperor Chen. At this time, anything he could do was redundant. It would be good not to do anything. As long as he didn't make any mistakes, he would be able to wait for the edict sooner or later. King Kong was injured twice and his body had recovered. Emperor Chen did not let him idle. Instead, he transferred him to Zhongzheng Temple and made him a young minister. Zhongzheng Temple is one of the 9 temples, and it is also the most special one among the 9 temples. It is mainly responsible for managing the affairs of the royal family. The officials in Zhongzheng Temple are more or less related to the royal family. Emperor Chen placed Prince Kong in Zhongzheng Temple just to give him a reason to stay in the capital. To some extent, Prince Kong has completely lost the possibility of winning the throne. Unless all the princes of Emperor Chen die, the throne will never come to him. Prince Duan is low-key, Prince Kong loses his qualifications, Prince Huai has more activities in the court, and he is also very talented. He can always complete some political affairs assigned to him by Emperor Chen, and has been praised many times by all officials. In the past few months, Zhao Yuan's figure has also appeared in everyone's sight. As a prince, he is diligent and studious. He reads for 4 hours every day, and does not forget to make soup and prepare meals for His Majesty. He should be a model of filial piety in the world, and has been praised by the censors. And Zhang Dexioshi, who is responsible for teaching Zhao Yuan, has also been praised many times by Emperor Chen. Speaking of Grand Secretary Zhang, since Wang Xiang impeached him in front of His Majesty and all the officials a few months ago, Grand Secretary Zhang and Wang Xiang seem to have completely turned against each other. These days, the two have been fighting in the court, often quarreling over a trivial matter. His Majesty has tried to persuade them many times but to no avail, so he just let them go. Who in the court is not an old fox? Although they are not emperors, they also understand the emperor's mind. Wang Xiang is the only prime minister of the dynasty, with power in his hands, second only to one person and above everyone else. The Zhang family is a century-old scholarly family that controls the Ministry of Rites and has a far-reaching influence in the officialdom. It is more reassuring for these two families to oppose each other everywhere than to unite together. Tang Ning has learned a little about these news. For him, as long as there is no major change, everything is moving in a good direction. After leaving Tianrunju, Tang Ning did not go home, but went to the Xiao family first. Although it would be more meaningful for Xiao Ju and others to tell Mr. Xiao about this matter in person, since he has mentioned it in front of Emperor Chen, it is better to go to the Xiao family. Xiao Mansion. Old Master Xiao looked at him and asked in surprise, "When did General Tang come back?" "Just 2 days ago." Tang Ning smiled and said, "Xiao Ju and the others may need some time to arrive in Beijing." "Sit down." Old Master Xiao stretched out his hand and said, "Xiao Fu, serve tea." "I won't sit down." Tang Ning waved his hand and said, "I came here today because I have a happy event to tell old General Xiao." "Happy event?" Lu Ding walked in from the door, looked at Tang Ning, and asked, "What happy event?" "Fortunate young gentleman." Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 743. This incident was a happy event for Mr. Xiao, but not for Lu Ding. The smile on Tang Ning's face faded and she asked, "Why is Mr. Lu here?" Mr. Xiao smiled and said, "After Zhu left, I was the only one left in the Xiao family. My in-laws often come here to accompany me, an old man." "What happy event did General Tang just say?" Tang Ning coughed lightly and said, "I just met your majesty." Xiao Ju's contribution to the peace of the grassland this time is indispensable. When he comes back, he will be promoted to General Zhou Xiaoei. He deserves a lot of credit. Mr. Xiao said without giving Xiao Ju any face. "Without you, he would have died on the grassland. Speaking of this, I haven't thanked General Tang properly." "You're welcome, sir." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "I have something else to do, so I'll go back first." Mr. Xiao was surprised and said, "General Tang, why don't you sit down and have a cup of tea before leaving?" "No, no, no." Tang Ning waved her hand and turned around without hesitation and walked back. It was better to wait until Lu Ding was gone to tell Mr. Xiao the good news. He had just taken 2 steps when he heard footsteps coming from the front. Tang Ning raised her head and saw Chen Huang and Wei Jian walking towards the side. Mr. Xiao and Lu Ding had already stepped forward to greet him, bowed and said, "See your majesty." "No courtesy." Huang Chen waved his hand and said, "It seems that I am still a step too late. Tang Ning has told you about the Xiao family's future, right?" Mr. Xiao was startled and asked, "If you have a queen, what kind of queen do you have? Didn't she tell you about Lu Shangshi's daughter Yuxi?" Chen Huang glanced at him and looked at Tang Ning in confusion. Tang Ning sighed, bowed her hands to Mr. Xiao, and said, "When I came back, Lu Ya was already 2 months pregnant. The Xiao family has a child. Congratulations to Mr. Xiao." He turned his head, looked at the ashen-faced Lu Ding, and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Lu." "Congratulations." Lu Ding was already stunned by the sudden news. He didn't care that Emperor Chen was still present and cursed loudly, "Two little beasts, they are insulting the family tradition, they are insulting the family tradition." Mr. Xiao, who was in high spirits, looked at him and frowned, "Who are you calling a little beast?" Lu Ding said angrily, "Those 2 little beasts. You still have the nerve to call other people little beasts." Mr. Xiao glanced at him and said disdainfully, "You got married in October, and Yatter was born in December. Others conceived in October, how could you, the Lu family, only 2 months? Who are you scolding?" "I didn't scold you." When Mr. Xiao and Lu Ding had a quarrel, Tang Ning sneaked out of the Xiao mansion. Let them quarrel between the Xiao family and the Lu family on their own. After the quarrel, the 2 parents still live together, and they will never turn against each other because of this happy event. However, I didn't expect that Lu Ding looked like a dog, and he was not a fuel-efficient lamp back then. In some families with strict family traditions, pregnancy before marriage would be severely punished, and it was very likely to cause death. Naturally, the general would not care about this. As a son-in-law, Xiaoju behaves in the same manner as his father-in-law did. When Tang Ning returned home, she was surprised to see Tang Yaoyao interrogating Chen Zhou. Chen Zhou stood in the courtyard, lowered his head and said, "My subordinates have seen with their own eyes that the general behaves well on the grassland and has never done anything to disgrace his wife." Tang Yaoyao looked at him and asked, "Did nothing happen between him and the fourth princess of the prairie?" Chen Zhou shook his head and said, "Absolutely not." Tang Yaoyao got the answer she wanted and left with satisfaction. Tang Ning walked in from the door. Chen Zhou looked at him and immediately bowed, "Sir." Tang Ning glanced at him with satisfaction and said, "Xiaoju will be promoted from Zhonglang General to General when he comes back this time. Who do you think is qualified for the position of Zhonglang General?" Chen Zhou said, "There are many senior colleagues in the army." Tang Ning patted his shoulder and said, "Qualifications mean nothing. Ability is more important than qualifications. Your performance this time is very good. When the time comes, I will mention something to His Majesty." Chen Zhou looked grateful and immediately said, "Thank you, sir." He comes from an ordinary background, and it is already rare to be able to sit in the position of a general at this age, and a general in the middle would not even dare to think about it. Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "No need to thank me, this is all due to your hard work. Talents should be treated as talents. It is indeed unfair for a talent like Chen Zhou to be just a mere general. Even Xiaoju can be considered a general. Chen Zhou is so busy these days that he can't even become a general." After Chen Zhou left, Tang Ning sat alone in the pavilion in the courtyard, and the atmosphere was slightly deserted. After he came back, he learned that Xiao Xiao had been taken away by the old beggar for training and had been gone for 2 months. A month ago, Tang Shui secretly took his mother to Jiangnan. Su Mei was now preparing to fight for the saint in Guizhou. The home feels quite empty. In the past 2 days since she returned home, Tang Ning had not seen Zhao Man. The Queen Mother is lonely, and she spends more time in the palace these days. After not seeing each other for several months, Tang Ning missed the way she acted coquettishly in his arms. Royal Palace. Zhao Man took the Queen Mother's arm and walked in the imperial garden. When she was tired, she came to a pavilion to rest. The Queen Mother slowly sat down and asked casually, "I heard that there was a victory in the north." Speaking of the north, Zhao Man's face showed a happy look and said, "Yes, the grassland has a new Khan, and he will not fight with us in the future." The Queen Mother remembered something and asked again, "I heard that their Khan is a girl." Zhao Man nodded and said, "I met her when I was in Chu State, and she even gave me a whip." The Queen Mother smiled and said, "The matter on the grassland is over. It's time for the soldiers to come back, right? Already on the way." Zhao Man said with a look of anticipation on his face, "We will arrive in Beijing in half a month at the latest. Then it's time for Tang Ning to come back, right?" The Queen Mother seemed to say something casually and smiled, "He has made such great contributions to the country at a young age. I wonder how your father will reward him this time." "Humph, reward him, I wish I could hit him a few times to make him remember it for a long time." Before Zhao Man could speak, a voice came from the front. The Queen Mother looked at Emperor Chen, who was walking over, and said in surprise, "Did he make His Majesty angry? This shouldn't be the case. He just pacified the south of the Yangtze River and the northwest." "That's the Queen Mother. You don't know what he did." Huang Chen shook his head and said, a little depressed, "He has been back to Beijing for 2 days, and he did not come back to me. Instead, he accompanied his wife to fly a kite. If I hadn't bumped into him on my private patrol incognito today, he might have waited until the main army commander came to see me." The Queen Mother smiled and said, "Young man, it's normal that he can't bear the pain of being separated in 2 places. He is a man of great talent. Your Majesty must be tolerant. Why can't he bear the pain of being separated? He did it on purpose." Chen Huang twitched his lips and said, "Although he is young, his mind is no less than those old foxes in the court. He is worried about his superiority. The earthquake master, today he specifically asked me to apologize, asking for the merits to be balanced against the faults. Before Chen Huang finished speaking, he looked at Zhao Man, who had been restless since just now, and asked, "Manner, what's wrong with you? Is there a prickly heat under your butt?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 744. No. Zhao Man's face flushed. Although her heart had long flown out of the palace, she could only sit here obediently at this moment. Emperor Chen looked at her and said, "The Queen Mother is bored in the palace alone. You might as well move back to the palace so that you can spend more time with her." Zhao Man looked at Emperor Chen, then at the Queen Mother, lowered her head, and whispered, "Manner knows." "Okay, okay." The Queen Mother waved her hand and said, "She doesn't find it annoying, but I do. She keeps chattering in my ears all day long. My ears are almost calloused. Let her leave the palace as soon as possible." Zhao Man was happy, but her face showed an unhappy expression. She shook the Queen Mother's arm with a dissatisfied expression, and said, "I'm not chirping." The Queen Mother waved her hand and said, "Let's go, I still have something to say to His Majesty." Zhao Man looked at Emperor Chen, who nodded and said, "Then you go back first." Zhao Man stood up, bowed, and said, "Father, Queen Mother, Manner will take her leave." She slowly walked out of the imperial garden and the palace. When she was about to reach the palace gate, she began to speed up her pace, and finally ran. The guards at the palace gate originally thought that she was a maid who was running away, and were about to stop her. When they saw her clothes and appearance, they immediately retreated, looking at Princess Pingyang, who got on a carriage at the palace gate with a surprised face, and they were a little confused. Zhao Man sat in the carriage and urged anxiously, "Hurry, go back to the palace." In the imperial garden, the Queen Mother looked at Emperor Chen and asked with a smile, "Is the matter in the north settled?" "It's settled." Emperor Chen smiled and said, "The grassland has been seriously damaged after this incident, and with the black barbarians restraining it, it will not be a threat to my Chen country for at least 10 years. If your father is still alive, he will be very happy to hear about this." A trace of reminiscence appeared in the turbid eyes of the Queen Mother, and she said slowly, "Your father's generation suffered too much loss and shed too much blood on the grassland. Chen will never let anyone bully us again." A trace of determination appeared in Emperor Chen's eyes, and he clenched his fist and said, "Within 10 years, I will make it the most powerful country in the world." Although this is arrogant, as the Emperor of Chen, he has the confidence to say this. With a full treasury and a stable domestic situation, Chen state originally had the strength to fight the grassland head-on. Now that the threat from the grassland has been eliminated, no country in the known land can compete with Chen state except Chu state. In his lifetime, he is expected to restore the glory of the prosperous Tang dynasty. The Queen Mother looked at him and said, "You have to take one step at a time. You have done something that even your father and the emperors of all dynasties have not done. You might as well stop and take a rest." "I dare not rest." Emperor Chen sighed and said, "Although Jiangnan and the northwest are settled, the chaos in the western regions has not been settled. Xiaoan is ambitious, and there is trouble in Kandy again. Xifen is eyeing the plateau. There are hidden dangers of the black barbarians in the depths of the grassland. How dare I rest?" He stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the sky, and said, "Kandy is adjacent to Jiangnan. If Kandy is in chaos, Jiangnan will bear the brunt. The capital is out of reach. The western regions have been troubling the central plains for a long time. Those tribes on the plateau have never been vegetarians. If Sushan cannot contain the black barbarians, Chen will be under their threat. I still have a lot of things to do, and I can't rest." In principle, Tang Ning is still on his way back to Beijing, so he doesn't have to work in the Shangsha province. He just came back from the grassland. If Emperor Chen asked him to go to the Shangsha province immediately, he would be too unhuman. However, although he was temporarily idle at home, Tang Ning still had to pay attention to Zhou Xiaoyi's affairs. He asked Chen Zhou to go to the cavalry camp to get the information. Not long after reading it, a figure walked in from outside the study. Tang Ning stood up and said with a smile, "Senior brother is back. Dr. Sun went to the neighboring county to practice medicine these 2 days." This was the first time Tang Ning saw him after returning to Beijing. Dr. Sun asked, "When did you come back? Why didn't you let me know?" Tang Ning smiled and said, "Brother, you are saving the world and the people. How dare I bother you?" Dr. Sun smiled and said, "My saving one person is nothing compared to your saving a country." It was embarrassing to brag to Dr. Sun here, so Tang Ning changed the subject and said, "Brother, you are back just in time. I have something to ask you." Dr. Sun said, "What is it?" Tang Ning looked at Dr. Sun and asked, "I don't know how much you know about the knockout drug. This drug is not only colorless, but also tasteless. Although it is not fatal, it is hard to guard against. Even people who are proficient in poison can be tricked if they are not careful. I don't know how many heroes in the world have fallen into this trap." Tang Ning asked this question because of what happened on the grassland. He himself was also proficient in poison, but he was tricked by this trick. It's better to ask clearly to avoid falling into the same trap in the future. I don't know which idiot gave this thing to Wang Yanyan. If she hadn't failed in basic education, she would have made a big mistake at that time. Dr. Sun looked at him and asked, "Why do you ask this, junior brother? Could it be that junior brother has also been poisoned by this poison?" Tang Ning smiled and waved his hand, saying, "How is this possible?" Dr. Sun stroked his beard and said, "It is said that this medicine is not only colorless and tasteless, but also has no solution. But whether there is a solution or not, I haven't studied it carefully." He looked at Tang Ning and said, "I wonder if junior brother has this medicine with him. Let me study it for 2 days and then give you an answer, how about it? Anyone who has nothing to do will bring the sweat medicine with him. Besides, he has a sleeping poison, which is more convenient to use than the sweat medicine." Tang Ning shook his head and said, "I don't have one on me either." He looked at Chen Zhou and said, "When you go back, buy some sweat medicine and bring it over tomorrow." "No need, I have Menghan medicine on me." Chen Zhou touched his arms and handed a paper bag to Tang Ning. Tang Ning looked at him in surprise and asked, "Why do you have this thing on your body?" Chen Zhou scratched his head and said, "Last time in the grassland, the fourth princess asked me for the sweat medicine and said it was useful, so I asked for some from the imperial doctor, gave some to the fourth princess, and left a little." He never expected that the Mongolian sweat medicine Wang Yanyan used on him was actually given by his personal guard leader. Tang Ning looked at him, her expression gradually darkened, and she said, "Just give it to her if she wants it. You are really kind-hearted." Chen Zhou had an embarrassed smile on his face and said, "Thank you, sir." There was a traitor among his men. Tang Ning felt depressed. As soon as she stepped into the inner courtyard, a figure rushed over from the front. Tang Ning hugged Zhao Man, who was like a baby girl, and spun around in a circle. She hooked her arms around Tang Ning's neck and hung her body on him. She said dissatisfiedly, "Humph, you've been back for 2 days and you haven't told me yet." Tang Ning pinched her nose and said, "I even hid it from His Majesty, how dare I tell you?" "I know." Zhao Man raised his head and said, "You were afraid that your achievements would shock the master, so you deliberately hid it from your father." "My father told me." Tang Ning stroked her hair, while Zhao Man leaned on his chest and asked, "Is the grassland fun?" Wang Yanyan said before that there are many fun things in the grassland. You can ride horses, shoot arrows, and catch rabbits. Tang Ning recounted to her the key points of what happened on the grassland, and of course concealed some of the thrilling processes. After Zhao Man heard this, she looked at him blankly and asked, "You and Wang Yanyan are married?" Tang Ning said, "That time was fake." Zhao Man said anxiously, "Then there will be a next time, and next time it will become real." Tang Ning said, "That will happen 3 years later. 3 years from now." Zhao Man thought for a while and didn't know what he thought of. Suddenly his eyes lit up and he said, "She can come to our Tang family, but you have to agree to one condition." Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "What are the conditions?" "Let her line up behind me." Zhao Man said with a smile on her face, "I want to be my sister." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 745. Tang Ning readily agreed to Zhao Man's request. The issue of being a sister is not a problem at all. Tang Ning felt sorry for her because she had come early but was always cut in line. "You said it," Zhao Man suddenly became happy, as if having more people in the family was not a big deal. She only cared about whether she would be at the end of the line. With Wang Yanyan at the end, her status in the family automatically increased by one, and she could hold her chest high when speaking in front of her. Tang Ning stretched out her palm and said, "Clap your hands to swear." Zhao Man clapped her hands with him, and immediately felt relieved. She snuggled in his arms and said coquettishly, "I missed you so much during the months you were away." Although they were both princesses, the gap between Wang Yanyan and Zhao Man was really too big. Ask yourself, if you are a man, who wouldn't like a girl like Zhao Man who is gentle and cute, but a wicked woman like Wang Yanyan who would use knockout drugs to harm him? Tang Ning has been back in Beijing for half a month. During this half month, he stayed at home and not many people knew that he was back in Beijing. It was not until half a month later that the 100,000-strong army from the capital appeared outside the city gate. As a marshal, Tang Ning naturally couldn't miss the celebration ceremony, so he left the city a day in advance and joined Xiaoju and the others. Lu Ya seems to be the type who easily shows her pregnancy. She is 3 months pregnant, and you can see some clues from the outside. Xiaoju looked at Tang Ning and asked, "Is my father in good health?" Tang Ning said, "Mr. Xiao is in good health, but Minister Lu is not." Xiaoju was shocked and asked, "Have you told my father-in-law about this news?" Tang Ning shook his head and said, "Not me." At that time, he wanted to keep it a secret for Xiaoju for a while, but Emperor Chen told him first, so it was not considered that he leaked the news. "Not you," Xiaoju showed a trace of anger on his face, and said, "Which bastard betrayed me?" Tang Ning glanced at him and said, "It was your majesty." Xiaoju was stunned, and his face showed embarrassment, saying, "Just pretend I didn't say it." After he finished speaking, he felt something was wrong and said in surprise, "No, how did your majesty know?" "Do you even need to ask?" Tang Ning glanced at him and said, "Your majesty's secret spies are all over the army. Maybe he even knows how long you lasted at night, let alone such a big thing. There must be secret spies of Emperor Chen in the army, but they are not so exaggerated. However, this is not the point. The point is that Xiaoju believed it." After that, he looked at everyone with a look that looked like a secret spy, which made the several lieutenant generals around him feel scared and avoid him. This great victory in the northern expedition was a bigger event than the suppression of the rebellion in the south of the Yangtze River, and it was even more significant to the state of Chen. Emperor Chen gave the soldiers the highest courtesy and personally led the civil and military officials out of the city to welcome them. So this scene appeared at the city gate. The army returned victoriously, and the emperor and his ministers were all smiling and happy. Among the crowd, only the Minister of War Lu Ding had a dark face, staring at a figure on a horse, wishing to cut him into pieces with his eyes. The army returned home with a complete set of etiquette regulations. After the ceremony, Emperor Chen returned to the palace, and all the officials dispersed in order. Xiaoju was about to run away, but Lu Ding had already appeared under his horse and said angrily, "Little beast, get off." Xiaoju looked at Tang Ning for help, and Tang Ning looked away. Seeing that no one could help him, Xiaoju could only jump off the horse dejectedly and said, "Meet my father-in-law." Lu Ding's forehead was throbbing with veins, and he said angrily, "Don't call me father-in-law, I don't have a father-in-law like you." "Oh." Xiaoju nodded and said, "Brother Lu, what do you want to talk to me about?" Tang Ning stood on the horse and could see Lu Ding's chest rising and falling, and veins on his forehead throbbing. He had seen a joke about a son-in-law who got drunk and swore brotherhood with his father-in-law. Xiaoju and Lu Ding didn't need to drink to swear brotherhood. In fact, they were peers and brothers. In other words, Xiaoju looked like a decent person, but he was actually a beast who got his niece pregnant. "Dad," Lu Ya jumped off the horse and looked at Lu Ding with dissatisfaction. "You're crazy." Lu Ding's eyelids twitched, and he hurriedly supported her, saying, "Can you jump from such a high place? What if something happens to the child?" "Pa, pa, pa." He slapped his mouth twice and said in a deep voice, "Come back with me." After that, he looked at Xiaoju again and said, "Little beast, go back and tell your father that Lu will visit you in an hour." Tang Ning didn't get involved in the family affairs of the Xiao and Lu families. He was more curious about how Emperor Chen would reward him this time. Being an emperor is not really arbitrary. Emperor Chen also needs to have a standard for his actions. Reward for merit and punish for fault. This is the rule that the superior must strictly follow. Only when rewards and punishments are clear can the people under him be convinced. If there is no reward for merit and no punishment for fault, the complete system of the court will be messed up. The problem is that Tang Ning is already the general of the left guard, the minister of personnel, and the left prime minister. The next military position is the general of the 16 guards, which is the pinnacle of military generals. The next civil position is the minister and prime minister, which is almost the pinnacle of civil officials. At his age, no matter which position he sits on, it will be a precedent since the founding of the state of Chen. Of course, in addition to promotion, there is also the increase of titles. But since a few decades ago, the titles of the state of Chen have been decreasing rather than increasing. The rich and powerful, as the name suggests, are at the pinnacle of power, with noble status, and a very small number of people who enjoy the vast majority of resources. They don't have to do anything, and they are also supported by the country. It is much easier for the children of the rich and powerful to advance in their careers than the children of the poor and the poor without background. It is precisely because of their transcendent status that these people often do some things that bully others, oppress the people, and become the country's parasites, sucking the nutrients of the state of Chen bit by bit. Therefore, the state of Chen has been deliberately reducing the titles since the previous emperor. When it came to this Emperor Chen, it was even more ruthless. Dozens of the rich and powerful in the original Kangwang line were all reduced to the end. Reducing the titles is the general direction of political correctness. As an emperor, it is unlikely to go against the trend and deny himself. It is for this reason that Tang Ning can't imagine what Emperor Chen will reward him. Rewarding silver is too vulgar, and rewarding beautiful women is not useful to him, and it is not the style of Emperor Chen. This matter is not only curious about Tang Ning, but also the whole capital. In the past 6 months, he first quelled the rebellion in Jiangnan, then stabilized the northwest, resolved the threat of the grassland, and saved the country and the people from danger several times. Such a person cannot be reassured without a heavy reward, and cannot be convinced without a heavy reward. But if he wants to be rewarded, his position is already very high, and it is not impossible to go up, but he is still too young. It is not a good thing to use a few years to complete the path of others for decades. It is easy to have an unstable foundation. They didn't wait long before they got the answer. This time the Northwest won a great victory, and the whole world celebrated. His Majesty was generous to all the soldiers. The merits of ordinary soldiers doubled, and the generals with outstanding achievements were promoted one level. Among them, Chen Zhou, the former right general of the left Xiao Yi, was promoted to the right general of the left Xiao Yi from now on, and the former right general of the left Xiao Yi, Tang Ning, disregarded his own safety in the battle in the northwest, led the troops and went deep into the enemy camp, and promoted the alliance between Chen State and the grassland. He made outstanding contributions and was promoted to the general of the left Xiao Yi. At the same time, he was also conferred the title of Marquis of Dingguo. Marquis of Dingguo was first established when the state of Chen was founded. From the title, it can be seen that this title is not conferred unless there are great contributions to the stability of the country. This title has always been conferred posthumously. Over the past few decades, only 3 people, including Tang Ning, have been conferred this title. The first 2 were both outstanding warriors on the battlefield and legends of the state of Chen. They were conferred the title of Marquis of Dingguo after their death, and their descendants could not inherit it. Tang Ning is the only person in history who was conferred this title while alive. He first pacified the south of the Yangtze River and then the northwest. His merits are fully worthy of this title. From today on, he is Marquis of Dingguo and a living legend of the current state of Chen. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiaorong. Chapter 746. Tang Ning still underestimated Emperor Chen's determination. As the general trend of the court was to suppress the powerful and the titles had been reduced over the years, Emperor Chen actually bucked the trend and granted him the title of Marquis of Dingguo. When Tang Ning learned the news, she actually refused in her heart. There is no other reason. Although Marquis Dingguo sounds domineering, before him, this title was awarded to dead people, and it was unlucky for a dead person to be given a title to a living person. Of course, he was a powerful broom star, and Chen Guo from Liubu to Shangshu province to Jiangnan, then to Chu state and the grassland, was controlled by him at home and abroad. Naturally, he did not have to worry about anything unlucky. He was thinking about what he would be awarded by Emperor Chen the next time he made a great contribution after being knighted this time. The official position cannot be promoted any further, and the marquis has already been established in one step. The next higher up is the Duke of the state. Among the existing county dukes of the Chen state, which one has not already had half of his body buried in the ground? Tang Ning would rather Emperor Chen convert these rewards into "I don't want these useless names." You don't want it for me. Xiaozhu looked at him with a look of jealousy on his face and said, Marquis of Dingguo, even my father is not qualified to be granted this title. Since the founding of Chen state, only 3 people including you have been able to win this honor. Do you think this is a big deal? Cabbage, is it weighed by the pound? Tang Ning glanced at him and asked, can I eat Chinese cabbage and make steamed buns? Can I hold the title of Marquis of Dingguo? Xiaozhu said angrily, this is something that will go down in history and be immortal. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, can I eat it? He had such an honor that others could only dream of, but he actually looked disgusted with it. What made Xiaozhu even more depressed was that based on his understanding of Tang Ning, his dislike was truly disgusting. Xiaozhu felt even more depressed. He threw an invitation on the table and said, in 3 days, remember to prepare a big gift. Xiaozhu came here to send an invitation. He and Luya were getting married in 3 days. It is said that Mr. Xiao specially invited officials from Qintian prison to calculate the auspicious day based on their birth dates. The calculated date was 3 months later. Lu Ding put a knife to his neck and asked again. The auspicious day was changed to 3 days later. The 2 of them got married without any warning. It was just a rush to get married. Luya was already a little pregnant. If the delay continued, the old Lu family would be embarrassed to see anyone in the capital. Although the Lu family is a general, not all generals are shameless. Among the generals, the Lu family is relatively shameless. In the past few days, the Xiao family has been full of joy. After Tang Ning was promoted, Xiao Ju inherited his position and became the general of Zhou Ziaoyin right. This was his first joy. Tang Ning's general Zhou Ziaoyi originally occupied the position of Mr. Xiao. After being replaced by Tang Ning, Mr. Xiao has become one of the three princes. He was named Tai Wei and became one of the 6 most respected people in the Chen kingdom. This is the second joy. Young Master Xiao, who can't get hard, is also getting married. This is his third happiness. Mrs. Xiao is pregnant, and the Xiao family, which has a small population, finally has a child. This is the fourth joy. Although they still don't know whether Lu Ya will give birth to a son or a daughter, they are not worried about not being able to raise a second child. As long as they keep having children, from a probability perspective, they will give birth to a son sooner or later. Today, the Xiao family has risen from a declining aristocracy to become the top generals of the capital. For the continuation of the family, it is necessary to spread its branches and leaves. In the eyes of officials and people in the capital, whether Mr. Xiao was promoted to the third duke or Xiao Ju was promoted to general, the influence of these two events could not be compared with that of Tang Ning's title. Mr. Xiao is the current father-in-law of the country. When he was young, he also made great contributions to the country. His Majesty has shown great love to the Xiao family over the years. It is not surprising that he ranks among the 3 princes. Xiao Ju's position as general was earned with his life in the northwest, and others were convinced. Only Tang Ning was granted the title of Marquis, which greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. Not to mention that the imperial court has not granted any title of Marquis for decades. He is the first person to be granted the title of Marquis in recent years. In terms of the status of a Marquis, no one in the entire capital can surpass him. This also shows from the side that his status in His Majesty's heart is higher than that of all ministers and dignitaries. Of course, the people's suspicion does not mean that he is not worthy of this title. Based on his achievements, it would not be unusual for him to be crowned king at the beginning of the founding of the country. It's just that the title of Marquis of Dingguo has never been given to anyone easily, and they often choose to replace it with others. His Majesty has broken the precedent this time. I don't know what his intentions are. After thinking about it carefully, he was already in a high position and had no rewards. It seemed that the only way was to become a knight. Normally, when he reaches this position, the emperor should worry about whether he will be arrogant and overwhelm the emperor with his great achievements, but His Majesty does not seem to be worried at all, and instead gives him all the trust and favor. For an emperor who was well versed in the art of the emperor and was good at playing with the balance of power, this was an extremely abnormal thing. Compared to His Majesty's thoughts, they were more curious about the mood of everyone in the Tang family. The Tang family used to be so glorious, but Tang Ning was just an abandoned son of the Tang family at that time. What about now? The Tang family has declined, and only one person from Zhongshu Shi is still good at it. The once abandoned son of the Tang family is now the Marquis of Dingguo, General Zhou Ziaoyi, Minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, and Zhou Cheng. Any of these titles can bring countless political resources to the Tang family and Prince Duan, but such people were pushed out hard by them back then. The atmosphere in the Tang family was very depressing. As glorious and festive as the other Tang mansion in Beijing was, this Tang mansion was so depressed and depressing. The other party returned victorious from the northern expedition and was named the General and the Marquis of Dingguo. He was praised and supported by the people of the capital. The servants of the Tang family became more cautious. If the master of the mansion was in a bad mood, they would not even breathe properly. A servant thought of this and sighed leisurely. If the master had chosen another way back then, how glorious would the Tang family be now? He just kept his head down and walked, and bumped into someone unexpectedly. When he raised his head, he immediately panicked and bowed and said repeatedly, "Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." Tang Zhao was holding a book in his hand and reading it. He didn't even look at him, waved his hand, and walked forward on his own. The Tang family servant was relieved a little. Everyone knew that the second son of the Tang family had the best temper. Even if the servants made mistakes on weekdays, he would not punish them, or he was too lazy to punish them. Every day, he read books, and he would not waste time on things other than reading books. It's strange to say, the second son used to hate reading, but since he was punished to be confined to the study for 2 months because of talking back to the master a few months ago, he seemed to have changed into a different person, studying so much that he forgot to eat and sleep, neither went out to drink and have fun, nor hung out with other playboys in Beijing, and locked himself in his room to read every day. The servants of the Tang mansion talked about this. Some said that the second son had opened his mind, some said that he was possessed by a demon. No matter what the reason was, the second son seemed to have changed into a different person compared to before, which was recognized by everyone. Tang Mansion, inside Tang Huai's study. Tang Huai rubbed his palms and asked softly, "Marquis Dingguo, what exactly does your majesty want to do?" "Will it be a case of flattery?" Tang Chi's face was gloomy. After thinking for a while, he said, "This boy has become a force to be reckoned with. With your majesty's mind, you must have been on guard against him. Now that Jiangnan has been settled and the northwest has been pacified, he has done things like putting away the bow after the bird is dead and cooking the dog after the rabbit is dead. Praise to death, bullshit. The rabbit is not dead yet, why eat dog meat?" Before Tang Huai opened his mouth, a voice came from outside the door. Tang Zhao walked into the study, took 2 books from the bookshelf, tucked them under his armpit, looked back, and said, "Chen State is now in turmoil, facing enemies on all sides. You don't use such a good talent, but suppress and kill him." "Dad, do you think your majesty is stupid?" "Asshole, what do you know?" Tang Chi frowned and said, "Jiangnan is stable, there are no major enemies on the grassland, why is Chen State in turmoil?" "There are no major enemies on the grassland." Tang Zhao glanced at him and asked, "Do you know why the Sushan people repeatedly violated the border?" Tang Chi said, "The Sushan people are ambitious and want to occupy the land of Chen State. They live well on the grassland, but they are so bored that they put their heads on their belts and run to Yinshan to fight with the border troops." Tang Zhao looked at him and said, "If they were not forced to stay on the grassland by the black barbarians, do you think they would make trouble for no reason?" He glanced at Tang Huai and Tang Chi and said, "The black barbarians are the biggest threat on the grassland. The Sushan people were beaten like dogs by them on the grassland. When they destroy Sushan, the next one will be Chenchu." He changed his tone and said, "This is just the grassland. In the past few months, Kandy has also been in chaos. If there is chaos in Kandy, the 2 roads in the south of the Yangtze River will be threatened immediately. What's more, there is Zioan in the western regions, and there are countless eyes on the western plateau. The surroundings are so chaotic, and your majesty still wants to suppress the meritorious officials. Do you think your majesty is a fool?" Tang Chi frowned and looked at him and asked, "Who told you this? Read more books and newspapers, and don't guess your majesty's thoughts." Tang Zhao patted the 2 books under his armpits and said as he walked out the door, "Books have their own golden houses and books have their own beautiful women. The ancients are not deceiving me. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 747. Tang Ning was reading a newspaper in her hand. Song Zhenzong once said something to encourage students all over the world, "Books have their own golden houses, and books have their own beauty like jade." The literal meaning of this sentence is easy to understand. Through reading, you can obtain glory, wealth, and charming wives and concubines. I don't know how many scholars regard this as their motto in life. Of course, Tang Ning didn't study for this, because he already had glory, wealth, and a beautiful wife and concubines. Reading is a channel for acquiring knowledge and information. It can also cultivate one's moral character and cultivate one's sentiments. Thousands of years of accumulation of a nation are contained in these pages. A person's temperament is different between a person who reads and a person who doesn't read. If you read too many books, even a fool can gain enlightenment. Tang Ning's current purpose of reading books and newspapers is firstly to kill time, and secondly to obtain information. The Jingxi Daily published by Tang Renzai is a semi-official newspaper. Half of the content is official gossip, advertisements, and rentals, etc. The other half is controlled by the court, and most of them publish some official articles or news. As the emperor, Emperor Chen was prepared for danger in times of peace and always reminded the people to be vigilant. Tang Ning also saw this from these newspapers. The newspaper in his hand used more than half of its page to analyze the situation around Chen state. As the old territory of the Liang kingdom, Qiandi is adjacent to Jiangnan. If there is chaos in Guizhou and evil intentions towards Chengguo, it will be beyond the reach of the capital, and Jiangnan may temporarily fall into the hands of the enemy. Deep in the grassland, the black man is like a huge dark cloud, hanging over the heads of the Sushan people. It is also a threat to Chen state and must be guarded against. Zioan in the western region, with his wolfish ambition, has grown into a threat that is not inferior to the grassland and has become the #1 enemy of Chen state. On the western plateau, there are countless pairs of eyes staring at the Central Plains dynasty. If they relax a little, the western Tibet will take advantage of the situation and become the enemy of the Chen kingdom just like the western regions. From Tang Ning's perspective, this article is naturally a bit unfounded. Qiandi itself is still in chaos, so there is no time to take advantage of Chengguo Jiangnan. The black barbarians are powerful, but the Sushan clan is not a vegetarian. If the black barbarians want to get out of the grassland, the difficulty is not ordinary. Zioan in the western region is currently facing, in addition to Chen state, there are also 2/3 of the small countries in the western region. It is difficult to achieve success in a short period of time. As for Zibo, the country he is most unfamiliar with, the history of this world is different. Xifen was beaten into a sieve during the heyday of the Tang dynasty and has not recovered for hundreds of years. How could it grow into Chengguo's opponent so quickly and easily? However, there is no mistake in being careful. Even if Chengguo has no superficial problems, the hidden dangers are real. With Chen Wang's cautious character, he may be so worried that he can't even sleep. Tang Ning was sleeping soundly these days. He had been abstinent for several months. Now he had endless energy and lived a fulfilling life every night. Xiao Ju's wedding was very exciting to Xiao Ru Ziaoi, and even more exciting to her mother-in-law. The news that Xiao Ju and Lu Ya were pregnant before marriage was not a secret in a small circle. In comparison, Tang Ning got married several years before him and still has no children, which seems to be more worrying. Tang Ning stayed in the grassland for several months, hiding from her mother-in-law's questioning for several months, and now, everything has returned to where it started. Tang Ning didn't want to be stared at by them with strange eyes every day, so she came to Shangshu province early. Shangshu Yucheng was sitting in his seat, raised his head, and immediately raised his hands and said, "See Marquis Dingguo." Tang Ning was very resistant to this title. She waved her hand and said, "There is no Dingguo Marquis here, so we can just call him the same as before." The Marquis of Dingguo is the most noble title in the Chen kingdom. Working with such a person, Shangshu Yushan was originally mentally burdened. But seeing that Tang Ning was still the same as before, he was immediately relieved. He smiled and said, "Master Tang just came back from the grassland, why don't you rest at home for a few more days?" Tang Ning said, "I eat your salary and share your worries. I can't forget my responsibilities." Shangshu Yushan looked solemn, cupped his hands and said, "Master Tang is really a role model for our officials, I admire you. Tang Ning arrived at Changsha province in the morning and was summoned by Emperor Chen in the afternoon. The summoning place was still in the imperial study room. There were several people in the imperial study room. Tang Ning raised her eyes and saw that all 6 ministers were there, as well as the prime minister. The ones in the front were King Huai and King Kong. King Duan had already started to win in Lu mode. He usually did not participate in court affairs and waited for Emperor Chen to pass the throne to him. Tang Ning was not surprised that he did not appear here, but the appearance of King Kong made him a little surprised. He has become the heir and no longer participates in court affairs. Emperor Chen transferred him to Zhongzheng Temple a few days ago. He also wanted to give him an errand so that he could gain a foothold in the capital. Seeing him in the imperial study today, he still has some real power in his hands. In addition to the mourning dynasty, Emperor Chen occasionally summoned important ministers from the dynasty to discuss state affairs in the royal study. Many people called this a little dynasty meeting. When Tang Ning walked in, Chen Huang was giving Lu Ding some instructions. The black barbarians are Sushen's enemy, and also are Chen state's enemy. Once they cross Sushen's defense line, the situation in the northwest will become tense again, and we have to guard against it. Emperor Chen looked at Lu Ding and said, the Chen state and Sushen are now in a close relationship. The people of Sushen want the heavy cavalry of our Chen state to resist the black barbarians. The Ministry of War can rent them 3,000 heavy cavalry and armor. Sushen also needs to set up a place to store the armor in the army, but it must be managed by Chen state's officers and men. The detailed rules shall be formulated by the Ministry of War. Lu Ding bowed and said, I obey the order. Wang Yanyan applied to Emperor Chen for a group of heavy cavalry, and Emperor Chen finally agreed. Of course, heavy cavalry is a powerful weapon of the country. Chen state only lent them armor, and these armors must be kept by Chen state soldiers. It can be said that they are extremely cautious. In fact, his approach is unnecessary. Without the support of Chen state, the grassland cannot afford heavy cavalry at all. The consumption of 3,000 heavy cavalry can drag them down in 3 months. After the grassland affairs are arranged, the next thing is the Ministry of Personnel. Ever since supporting Jiagushu and the Wanyan tribe in the confrontation, Emperor Chen has liked this method. In dealing with the matter of Zioan in the western regions, his approach is exactly the same as that of the grassland. The western regions are very large, and Zioan only occupies 1/3 of the area. Zioan's rapid expansion in recent years has long caused panic among the countries in the western regions. Emperor Chen plans to send envoys to contact these small countries and unite many small countries in the western regions to attack Zioan from both sides. In addition, the chaos in Kiandi also attracted the attention of Emperor Chen. Although Kiandi is not the territory of Chen, it is closely related to the stability of Jiangnan and must be prevented. He also arranged for secret agents to investigate. Finally, he looked at King Kong and said, in a few months, it will be the royal ceremony. Zhongzheng Temple and the Ministry of Rites, start preparing now. King Kong bowed and said, Father, the royal ceremony is always in the charge of Zhongzheng Temple. Will we join forces with the Ministry of Rites this year? Emperor Chen nodded and said, I plan to hold this year's ceremony at the Zishan Imperial Mausoleum. The grassland has been decided. I want to let the ancestors see it. The royal ceremony is held every year, but it is held in the palace. This year, Emperor Chen moved it to the location of the Zishan Imperial Mausoleum, obviously with the intention of showing off. After all, as an emperor, he has accomplished a great feat that no emperor of the Chen kingdom has accomplished. He only held a large royal ceremony and did not hold the Fengshan ceremony. This is already considered to be extremely restrained. After Emperor Chen finished giving all these instructions, he finally looked at Tang Ning and said, You have worked hard in this northern expedition. I allow you to rest at home for 2 months. During these 2 months, you don't have to go to the Changsha province. Tang Ning would rather read memorials in the Shangsha province than go home and be forced to give birth. She cupped her hands and said, "Your Majesty, I am not tired and don't need to rest." "You should take a good rest." Emperor Chen waved his hand and said, "Xiaoju is going to have children before getting married. You have been married for 3 years and have many wives and concubines, but you don't have any children. It's better to go home and recuperate. I will send a few imperial doctors to see you." After Emperor Chen finished speaking, the two princes changed their expressions. Lu Ding's face was red. Tang Ning couldn't explain. She could only frown and cup her hands and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 748. As the Emperor, Emperor Chen summoned him to the palace, not to discuss national affairs, but to ask him why he had no children. Didn't he want to lose face in public? Fortunately, Tang Ning was not the most shameless person. He noticed that after Chen Huang finished speaking, Lu Ding lowered his head and his face turned the color of pig liver. It turns out that Lu Shangsha's daughter has been pregnant for a long time. No wonder the Xiao family is so anxious to get married. No matter how late it is, they won't be able to hide it. It is said that the auspicious day was supposed to be 3 months later. The officials of the Qintian prison were changed by Lu Shangshu, who put a knife on his neck. No wonder, let me just say, there is no such thing as a coincidence. If it were anyone else, he would have been chopped down by him with a knife if he refused to give Lu Ding and the Lu family face. But the person who leaked the news was the emperor, so he could only knock out his teeth and swallow it in his stomach. Huang Chen asked Tang Ning to rest at home, and Tang Ning agreed. You can hide for a while, but you can't hide for a lifetime. Some things are better explained clearly. When he walked out of the royal study, he looked at the person in front of him and said, "Lord Qian, stay." Qianshuo, the Minister of Household Affairs, looked at him and asked doubtfully, "What's the matter, Mr. Tang?" Tang Ning smiled and said, "I have a small matter, and I would like to ask Mr. Qian for a favor." Qianshuo smiled and said, "It's okay, Mr. Tang." Tang Mansion. Chen Yuxian sighed leisurely and said, "Has Ninger been avoiding us these days? He just came back from the grassland. He never rests. He goes to the government office early in the morning and returns late every day. How could it be?" Zhonyi held her hand and said, "My husband has many jobs and is very busy with official duties. Maybe there are more things in the yamen, so he can live a better life." Chen Yuxian sighed softly and said, "No matter how busy the official affairs in the yamen are, we can't rely on him alone." When she looked at Zhonyi again, she asked, "What is going on with you? You don't tell me every time I ask you. Look at Miss Lu." Zhonyi lowered his head, his expression a little disappointed, and said, "My husband has his own plans." Chen Yuxian lamented, "He didn't say anything about his plans." Tang Ning walked in from the door, placed a booklet on the table, and said, "Mother-in-law, please take a look at this first." Chen Yuxian opened the book he placed on the table in surprise, his face gradually turned pale, and he murmured, "Is this true? This is the data I found from the Ministry of Household Affairs." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "There are tens of thousands of women who die from dystocia in Chen State every year, and the earlier the childbirth age, the greater the risk. Lu Ya has reached the age suitable for childbearing, but Xiao Ruxiayi hasn't reached it yet, and your mother-in-law doesn't want them to be put in danger, right?" Chen Yuxian held the booklet in his hand, pursed his lips, and said nothing more. A moment later, in a room somewhere, Zhong Mingli looked at her and said, "Have you forgotten how dangerous it is when you have a little business? Yao Yao's mother did the same thing, and Ninger also thinks about them." He should have said it earlier. Chen Yuxian put down the booklet with lingering fear and said, "I have been waiting for 1 or 2 years, and there is no harm in waiting for another one." Tang Ning was sitting alone in the study, looking out the window. Xiru and Xiaoi's lack of age is not the only reason why he doesn't want children yet. Another important point is to be free from worries. From today on, no one can predict what will happen in the next year. If they become pregnant within this year, their family will be subject to many restrictions. After returning from the northwest, Tang Ning's military career has reached its peak, and his civilian career is also close to its peak. The Lord cannot be higher. More importantly, he already has many resources in his hands, and he can do things he has always wanted to do but has not done. For example, settling some old scores with certain people. Zhou Mingli walked in from outside the door and said softly, "Just listen to what your mother-in-law says. You have your own plans. Women are women and don't know anything. Xiru and Xiaoi's health is important." Tang Ning smiled and said, "Actually, we don't want to have children for the time being, and it's not just for this reason." Zhou Mingli said in surprise, "What else is there?" Tang Ning said, "I plan to attack the Tang family." When Zhou Mingli heard this, he was suddenly shocked. He had long known about the grievances between Tang Ning and the Tang family. From the time they first arrived in the capital, their family had been controlled in every way and made things difficult for them by the Tang family. Step by step, they had come to today, bringing down the Tang family. How difficult and dangerous the road was and how complicated the process was. Difficulties are only clear to them. Now that he is in a high position, it is time to collect debts from the Tang family. It's just that a skinny camel is bigger than a horse. No matter how the Tang family declines, it is also Tang Huifei's natal family, the maternal clan of Prince Duan, and a relative of the emperor. If you want to touch the Tang family, you have to go through Prince Duan, concubine Hui, and your majesty. How easy is this? He did not persuade Tang Ning. After thinking about it, he asked, "Do you need me to do anything?" Tang Ning smiled and said, "No, I already have arrangements." Zhou Mingli said no more, walked out of the study and went straight to Jingzhou Mansion Yamen. Sir, when the policemen in the government office saw him, they all saluted. Zhou Mingli looked at one person and said, "Go and ask Peng Chen." Not long after, Peng Chen, who had been promoted to the chief catcher of Jingzhou Mansion, walked in quickly, cupped his hands and said, "What are your orders, sir?" Zhou Mingli looked at him and said, "Go and get all the case files related to the Tang family in the capital and send them to me." Royal Palace. Royal Study Room. In his rare free time, Emperor Chen walked around the imperial garden and said, seemingly unintentionally, "Tell me, why doesn't he have children?" Wei Jian slowly followed him and said awkwardly, "Your Majesty, Mr. Tang himself cannot completely decide whether to have a child." Chen Huang glanced at him and said, "Just because you can't make the decision, doesn't mean that others can't make the decision." Wei Jian smiled coquettishly and changed the subject, "Why is your Majesty suddenly concerned about whether Mr. Tang will have children or not?" Chen Huang slowly stopped and said, "I can see that he has a big heart. Only when he has concerns in his heart can he honestly stay in the capital and be fully used by me." Wei Jian smiled and said, "Master Tang is now a general and a marquis of Dingguo. His foundation and everything are in the capital. How could he leave here? This is just my feeling." Chen Huang looked at one place and said, "I am worried about another thing." Wei Jian raised his head and said, "What are you worried about, your Majesty?" Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, "If you have been bullied and suppressed at every turn along the way, and have been in danger of your life many times, what will happen if you one day become a successful person and soar into the sky?" Wei Jian thought for a while and said, "If I am an old slave, I must pay with the blood of those who bullied me." "That's right, if you don't avenge your hatred and don't hold your grievances to account, it will be hard to settle down after all." Emperor Chen sighed softly and said, "I don't know what he will do to the Tang family next. I don't want to see chaos in the court." Wei Jian was startled and said, "It turns out that your Majesty is talking about Mr. Tang." The Tang family has declined to this point and has received the punishment it deserves. Besides, Mr. Tang is broad-minded and open-minded. He should. The more Wei Jian spoke, the softer his voice became, and finally he stopped saying a word. Chen Huang glanced at him and asked, "Why, don't you even believe it yourself?" Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 749. Small-minded, careless, and always seeking revenge, revenge does not last overnight. These are all descriptions of a certain big shot in Beijing. If words like broad-minded and open-minded can be used on him, then the world will be full of broad-minded people. Wei Jian swallowed back the words he blurted out and said awkwardly, "The things the Tang family did to Mr. Tang, the old slave thought it was too much. With his character, he would glare back at anyone who glared at him. He has a life-or-death hatred. I'm afraid it's impossible to uncover it." Chen Huang shook his head and sighed, "If he is an old fox who knows the general situation, he must know that I don't want to make this matter a big deal, but he is not. Young people like them just have a breath in their chests." Wei Jian smiled and asked, "What does your majesty mean?" Emperor Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. One was a pillar with outstanding contributions to the country, and the other was a powerful family that had controlled the government for many years and had declined in the past 2 years. He knew which one was more important. If he wants to vent his anger, let him vent his anger. Chen Huang breathed a sigh of relief and said, "The Tang family has indeed gone too far in recent years." Chen Huang gave Tang Ning a 2-month-long vacation. It was already early September, and by the time he returned to the office, it would be almost the end of the year. 2 months is not a short time. You can do a lot in 60 days. Before that, he planned to visit some people. After dinner, Tang Ning was about to go out. Zhou Mingli looked at him and said, "I have something to give to you." Zhou Mingli placed a large stack of files on Tang Ning's desk and said, "These are all the cases related to the Tang family that have been accumulated by Jingzhou Mansion and Ping'an County in the past 10 years. They should be useful to you." Tang Ning originally planned to ask the Ministry of Justice or Dali Temple to handle this matter, but she didn't expect that Zhou Mingli had already prepared it for him. Tang Ning stood up and said, "Thank you, father-in-law." "Family, don't say such disrespectful things." Zhou Mingli looked at him and said, "Don't forget, I am also a 4th-grade official. If you need help from the government for anything, just tell me. My father-in-law is a 4th-rank official, and he is also the parent official of Jingzhou Mansion. Naturally, he can help Tang Ning in many ways." He originally didn't want him to get involved in this matter, but now that he said so, Tang Ning had no choice but to nod. Said, "In this case, let's start with the government office first." Zhou Mingli walked out of Tang Ning's study, heaving a sigh of relief with a happy expression on his face. In the past few years, others said that he was lucky enough to pick up a powerful uncle for nothing, and he was promoted all the way to the position of Jingzayin. He had always turned a deaf ear to these gossips, but in his heart, a man's dignity prevented him from enjoying all this with peace of mind. He always hoped that he could help Tang Ning, but every time before he could speak, his opponent would appear. All fell into disrepair. This time, he was finally able to save some face as his father-in-law. There was originally a wall between Tang Ning's study and the yard next door, but it was later destroyed by Rich Man Tang and turned into a moon gate. Rich Man Tang walked out from behind the moon gate. When he saw Zhou Mingli, he raised his hand and said, "Old Zhou, are you free? Let's play chess." Zhou Mingli waved his hand and said, "You can do it yourself. I have important things to do. Do you think anyone else is as free as you?" Rich Man Tang looked at Zhou Mingli walking out of the yard in surprise. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but today he always felt that his steps were a little wandering. The Tang Mansion in the capital. The weather is good today, but the Tang Mansion is as depressing as ever. Ever since the head of the family was removed from the position of minister and appointed a prince with a high official rank but no real power, the Tang family, which was once powerful, officially declared its decline. From being full of guests at its peak, to now it is sparse, with no guests at all for half a month. Come to the door. The concierges of the Tang mansion have become accustomed to all this. In the past few months, they would feel strange when guests came to the house. The tree fell and the hosen scattered, and the wall fell and everyone pushed it away. Although the wall of the Tang family has not fallen down, it will never regain its former glory. There were a few more figures at the door of Tang mansion today, but they were not guests. The visitors were all wearing soap-coated yamen uniforms. After revealing their identities, the concierge learned that they were agents of the Jingzhou Yamen. A year ago, not to mention the Jingzhou mansion's arrests, the Tang mansion's concierge would not take a serious look at officials below the fourth rank, but now it is different. Not to mention the fourth rank, even the fifth and sixth rank officials would not look at them seriously. If they don't want to come to the Tang mansion, they have to be careful even if they are the agents of the small Jingzhou mansion. A concierge smiled apologetically, looked at the head catcher, and asked, "I wonder what the important business is for me to come to my Tang mansion." Peng Chen said, "The master of the Tang mansion is involved in a case. In your name, we summon the master of the Tang mansion to the Yamen." The master of the Tang mansion is the head of the Tang mansion. Which Yamen in Beijing dared to summon the master of the Tang mansion? The concierge's expression suddenly changed. These people were clearly here to cause trouble. He looked at Peng Chen and asked, "May I ask what the case is? Could it be a mistake? How could the Tang family? Is it possible? Let's talk about it when we get to the Yamen." Peng Chen waved his hand and said, "Should we go in and get the person, or should you go and ask him to come out?" The porter immediately said, "Please wait a moment, sir, I will go in immediately to report." After Tang Hui called himself Prince's young master, he no longer had to go to the Yamen. The Prince's young master, as the name suggests, those who hold this official position have the responsibility to teach the prince. However, there is no prince in Chen state, so his role as the prince's young master has no meaning. At this moment, the concierge was telling them what happened at the door. "That's unreasonable," Tang Qi stood up angrily and said, "Jingzhou mansion is so brave. Who gave them the power to go to the Tang family to take people?" "Your Majesty." Tang Zhao, who was looking down at his book, raised his head and said, "A few years ago, Your Majesty gave the former Pinggan County magistrate, now Jingzhou Prefecture, a sign. With this sign, he can punish mobs and prosecute corrupt officials. In principle, in addition to the royal family, he can arrest anyone he wants in this capital." Tang Hui looked at the concierge and asked, "Did they say it was because of some case?" The concierge shook his head and said, "They didn't say anything." "Brother can't go." Tang Qi looked at him and said, "You represent the face of the Tang family. This is the last face of the Tang family. The governor of Jingzhou is Tang Ning's father-in-law." Tang Zhao looked at them and added, "Obviously, he just wants the Tang family's face. If the uncle doesn't go, who can go?" Tang Qi looked at him. Tang Zhao put down the book in his hand, his throat moved, and said, "Do you think this is appropriate?" At the gate of the Tang mansion, Tang Zhao looked at the police officer from the Jingzhou mansion and said, "Let's go. I am the young head of the Tang family. I can represent the Tang family. If you have any questions, we will talk about it when we get to the Yamen." Peng Chen glanced at him and didn't ask any questions. He nodded and waved, "Go back to the office." Within the Tang family, Tang Qi held the teacup in his hand tightly and gritted his teeth and said, "A tiger falls in Pingyang and is bullied by a dog. How dare a mere Jing Zhaoyan dare to humiliate the Tang family like this? It's not Jing Zhaoyan." Tang Hui stood up and said, "He is the minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, General Zhou Xiaoyi, Minister Zhou Cheng, and Marquis Ding Guo. He looked at Tang Chi, sighed, and said, I really regret this time. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 750. In the past, the Tang family believed that face was the most important thing, so after that scandal, they wanted to save the family's face at all costs. 20 years have passed. At that time, the Tang family never thought that the Tang family would decline to this point 20 years later, and that the child they assassinated several times would grow into such a big shot. 20 years ago, the Tang family broke up Tang Yu and his wife, imprisoned her at home, and preserved some face. 20 years later, they lost not only face, but also power, wealth, influence, the reason for the past. As a result of today, Tang Hui, as the head of the Tang family, had the thought of regret for the first time. Tang Chi clenched and unclenched his fists and asked, Do you want to report to the Empress and Prince Duan? No need. Tang Hui was silent for a long time before he said, The Tang family's face is not worth much money now. Don't drag Prince Duan into the water. Maybe this is their real purpose. Although Duan Wang has been silent these days, he has neither merit nor demerit. To them, no fault is merit. Duan Wang has become the last hope for the Tang family to rise again in the future. The Tang family can attack, but nothing can happen to Duan Wang. Tang Chi nodded, feeling a strong sense of powerlessness in his heart. In the past few years, the Tang family has gradually declined and has long lost its former glory. During Tang Ning's 6th department tour, their political resources in the court were almost wiped out. Now, even a mere Jing Ziyin can bully them at will. Go to the Tang family. Jingzhou Mansion Office. Tang Zhao cupped his hands to the person in front of him and said, Tang Zhao has met Mr. Fu Yin. The man in front laughed dryly and said, Young patriarch has admitted the wrong person. I am Jingzhou Sheiyin. Mr. Zhong is busy with official duties, so he handed this case over to me. Tang Zhao took a closer look and said apologetically, It turns out to be Master Sheiyin. I've been suffering from eye disease recently. I can't see clearly from a distance. Don't blame Sheiyin. No, seeing that he had a good attitude, Jingzhou Sheiyin secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Although the Tang family has declined, everyone knows that this is a temporary low point. When King Duan comes to power, the Tang family will be able to regain its former glory, and perhaps even be better than before. Making trouble for the Tang family can be a quick gain, but it is a desperate approach. But if he is not causing trouble for the Tang family, he is disobeying his superior's orders. The last Sheiyin was offended by Jing Ziyin, who had not yet taken office. Now he is still wandering around the counties of Jiangyi like a lonely ghost. He does not want to follow the other party's lead. Follow in the footsteps. Tang Zhao looked at him and asked, I wonder what case the Tang family is involved in this time. It's like this. Jingzhou Sheiyin said, several farmers outside the city sued the Tang family for occupying their fields 5 years ago. I'm really sorry. I didn't know those bastards in my family actually committed such a thing. Tang Zhao looked at him and said, well, of course the Tang family has to make up for the mistakes they made. I'll go back. I wonder what Mr. Sheiyin thinks of returning the land to them and making up for their 10 years of losses. Jingzhou Sheiyin was startled. He didn't expect that this matter could be solved so easily. He immediately nodded and said, that's very good. The reason why powerful people are powerful is that they have noble status, transcendent status, and have privileges that ordinary people do not have. I don't know how many dignitaries in Beijing have done this kind of thing, but the common people dare not report it, and the government will not pursue it. If the trouble becomes too big, some dignitaries will choose to pay some money out of face, so as to calm down the matter, and the government will generally I won't pursue it any further. If you seize these trivial matters and pursue them relentlessly, you won't offend the powerful family or two. Tang Zhao nodded, looked at him, and said, "Please let the government officials and I go back to the Tang family to get compensation from those people." The Tang family's case went surprisingly smoothly. The Tang family was willing to return the land and provide excessive compensation. This was almost the best outcome. It seems that the Tang family is no longer the Tang family before. How could they compensate before it was changed? They had already threatened and intimidated them. Jing Zhao Shaiyin put his heart down again, went to the back office, and reported to Jing Zhaoyin. Zhou Mingli stood up and asked, "The Tang family is willing to return the land and pay compensation." Jing Zhao Shaiyin cupped his hands and said, "The person sent by the Tang family is Tang Zhao, the young master of the family. His attitude is very good and there is no excuse. The lower official has already sent people to collect the land deed and fine from the Tang family." Zhou Mingli nodded slightly. Jing Zhao Shaiyin cupped his hands and retreated. Zhou Mingli looked out the window and sighed softly. The Tang family's reaction was beyond his expectation. With their cooperation, Jingzhou Mansion could only act in accordance with the law. This case, apart from causing the Tang family to lose some money, would have no other effect. Although the outcome of the matter was different from what he imagined, he originally did not expect this case to bring down the Tang family. He quickly put his mind together and looked at the file in his hand again. Tang family. After Tang Zhao returned home, he walked into the study and stared at him with two pairs of eyes. He looked at Tang Hui and Tang Qi and said, "It's not a big deal. I don't know which bastard took over someone else's land 5 years ago. Now the owner has come to the government office. I will pay it back to them in the name of the Tang family." Tian lost the money and is fine now. 5 years ago, Tang Qi looked at him and said, "5 years ago, you were the one who occupied the land to build a separate courtyard, you bastard." "Ah, really?" Tang Zhao scratched his head and said, "It seems that there was such a thing. Who still remembers what happened 5 years ago?" Tang Qi did not continue to blame him, but frowned and said, "The case from 5 years ago was only revealed now, just to discuss the Tang family. People have dug up things from 20 years ago, let alone things from 5 years ago." Tang Zhao curled his lips and said, "Without that thing from 20 years ago, there wouldn't be so many things happening now." "Shut up!" Tang Qi glared at him and said, "Go back to your room. It was your fault in the first place, and you still want to blame me." Tang Zhao muttered, and when he saw the two people looking at him, he immediately ran out. Jingxi Daily is a newspaper published by Tang Grenzai. In addition to some serialized novels and interesting stories in Beijing, it often publishes some official news. For example, the new policies that the court is about to implement, or any major news, will be printed in the newspaper. In today's newspaper, Jingzhou Prefecture published a case in the most conspicuous position. The Tang family in the capital occupied the people's land and was summoned by the Jingzhou Prefecture. In the end, they not only returned the land, but also paid a large amount of fines. The Jingzhou government office aims to appeal through this incident that the powerful in the capital cannot rely on their power to oppress the people. The Jingzhou government office will investigate any case and fight against any injustice. It will not hesitate to offend the powerful and will also stand up for the people. The people can see the fact that the Tang family has declined from this case. By publishing this small case in the most obvious position in the newspaper, the Jingzhou government office has no intention of saving face for the Tang family. The decline of the Tang family is not only reflected here, but also at this time of year in previous years. When the head of the Tang family celebrated his birthday, the carriages at the gate of the Tang mansion could line up 2 streets away. This year, only a few people from the Tang family chose a restaurant in the capital. The Grand Prince's young master celebrated his birthday. Even if he did not hold a big banquet at home, he should go to a place like Tianrunju that was worthy of his status. Although Tianxianglu is also a top restaurant in the capital, it is still a little behind Tianrunju. At the entrance of Tianxiang Tower, Tang Chi got off the carriage, crumpled up a newspaper he had just bought, looked at Tang Hui angrily, and asked, "For this trivial matter, Jingzhou Prefecture is making such a fuss. What do you think, brother?" Tang Hui slowly got off the carriage and said, "This case is nothing. I'm afraid it's just the beginning." Tang Chi threw away the paper ball and said coldly, "If you want to bring down the Tang family, it's far from enough for him to be the Jingzhou Yin." Before he finished speaking, he saw Tang Hui looking away. Tang Chi looked over and saw several figures walking out of Tianrunju not far ahead. Walking in front was the famous figure in Beijing in recent days, Ding Guoho, Zhou Xiaoei General, Ministry of Personnel Assistant Minister, Shang Shizuokan Tangning. To his right was Jing Zhaoyin Zhong Mingli. To his left was Ministry of Personnel Fang Hong. Walking side by side with Fang Hong was Ministry of Punishment Song Yi. Half a body behind the Minister of Justice, who looked somewhat similar to him, was Song Qian, the Chief Justice of Jiangxi Province. The two young figures behind him, although Tang Chi was not familiar with them, had some impression of them. One was Su Qingyang, the youngest censor of the Censorate, the supervisory censor of Jiangxi Province. The other was Zhang Yanzheng, the Chief Justice of the Dali Temple, who had just been transferred to the Dali Temple and had solved several major cases. These people were either in charge of the promotion and assessment of officials or investigating the illegal activities of the powerful. When the officials from the Ministry of Justice, the Censorate, the Dali Temple, and the Ministry of Justice gathered together, the Prime Minister would tremble. Tang Chi trembled and his face turned pale. He saw a huge net covering the sky and the earth, covering the Tang family. Tang Ning walked out of Tianrunju, and suddenly felt something in his heart, and looked somewhere in front of him. Seeing the two figures getting off the carriage, he smiled and raised his hand and waved gently. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 751. In the Tianxiang building, everyone in the Tang family sat in the largest elegant pavilion. The wine and food on the table had already been served, and the aroma was fragrant, but no one started eating. Tang Zhao looked at the table full of wine and food, swallowed his saliva secretly, put down the chopsticks he had picked up, looked at Tang Hui, then looked at Tang Chi, and asked, "Aren't you going to eat?" Today was the birthday of the head of the family, but the scene seen at the door of the Tianxiang building just now made everyone unhappy. The former abandoned child of the Tang family has now become the most dazzling star in the capital, and all the people he makes friends with are big figures in the court. On the other hand, the Tang family has fallen to this point. No one in the family holds a high position. Looking around, there are no vassals in the court. The taste of being in the clouds and in the mud is not pleasant. No one picked up their chopsticks for a long time. Seeing that the food was getting cold, Tang Chi looked at Tang Hui. Tang Hui waved his hand and said, "Start eating." The head of the family spoke, and everyone picked up their chopsticks. This birthday banquet was tasteless. The head of the family did not say a word during the whole process. Everyone did not dare to speak, but just ate in silence. Until the end of the banquet. At the Tang family, it was late at night, and the lights were still on in Tang Hui's study. "He is provoking." Tang Chi clenched his fist and said, "After so long, he is finally going to show his fangs to the Tang family." Jingzhou Prefecture, Ministry of Justice, Dali Temple, Censorate, Ministry of Justice. Tang Hui looked at the night outside the window and said, "He wants to kill the Tang family." Tang Chi said, "Should I notify the Queen immediately?" "As long as the Queen informs His Majesty will not sit idly by." Tang Hui glanced at him and said, "Don't forget who asked him to walk the 6 ministries." Tang Chi said unwillingly, "Are we just going to sit there and wait for death?" "Let's see first." Tang Hui sat down slowly and said, "Whatever tricks he has, the Tang family will follow." Tang Qi knew very well that the decline of the Tang family was temporary. No matter how the Tang family fell, as long as Prince Duan did not fall, the Tang family would always have a chance to regain its glory. But even with the trump card of Prince Duan, it would take effect only when the new emperor ascended the throne. Now the Tang family is in a state of decline, and anyone can come forward to step on them. The Tang family has been dominating the capital for decades, and has never suffered such humiliation. However, the situation is stronger than the person. The current Tang family is far less powerful than someone else. The others are the knives and I am the fish. The Tang family is the fish on the chopping board, just like the young lady and the scholar facing the Tang family 20 years ago. After Tang Qi left, Tang Hui stood up. Although his face was calm, his fists were clenched tightly, and his nails left deep marks on his fingertips. Tang Ning rested in Tang Yaoyao's room tonight. After returning to Beijing, he usually took turns to rest in the rooms of the three people, so as not to let the servants have the illusion that a certain lady was neglected. Today, he hosted Fang Hong, Song Qian, and others at Tianrunju, and the reason was naturally for the Tang family's affairs. Since he had decided to settle accounts with the Tang family, he did not leave any room for the Tang family from the beginning. The Song Qian brothers were able to mobilize the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Justice, the Censorate had Su Qingyang, the Ministry of Personnel had recently transferred Zhang Yanzheng to the Dali Temple, and with the Jingzhou Prefecture and Ping'an County Office, the Tang family would be very busy in the near future. The Tang family was too powerful, with a deep foundation in the state of Chen. Even if it fell to the current point, there was still a chance to turn the tables. Of course, Tang Ning would not give them such an opportunity. He had waited for 4 years to get to this point today. The hatred of life and death was not something that everyone could let go of. Before he was ready to take action, he had accumulated enough strength. Tang Yaoyao supported his chin, sat opposite him, and asked, "What are you thinking about?" When Tang Ning looked at Tang Yaoyao, he suddenly remembered something. Chen State and the grassland reconciled and exchanged what they had. There would be countless business opportunities between the two countries in an instant. It is foreseeable that after the border is officially lifted, countless merchants will flock to the grassland to seize the market. And the future business focus of the Tang family must not be in the capital. From now on, we must prepare for the future. Tang Ning looked at her and said, "I want to send a caravan to the grassland to seize business opportunities before the border is lifted. You arrange a team these days. When you arrive at the grassland, I will let Wan Yanyan help them." Tang Yaoyao looked at him and said angrily, "You are really thinking about that little wild horse?" Tang Ning was stunned and explained, "I'm talking to you about the caravan. I'm talking to you about that little wild horse." Tang Yaoyao put her hands on her waist and said, "You haven't explained what happened last time. You participated in that competition. What happened later?" Tang Ning looked at her and said, "Let's talk about this later. What did you ask me just now?" Tang Yaoyao said, "I asked you about your little wild horse." Tang Ning shook his head and said, "No, it was the previous sentence." Tang Yaoyao thought for a while, looked at him, and asked, "What were you thinking about just now?" Tang Ning lay on the bed, closed his eyes, and said, "I was thinking about nothing." Emperor Chen gave Tang Ning a 2-month-long vacation. He was idle at home for these 2 months. The same Tang family, but the other Tang family was not so idle. In the past few days, Ping'an County Yamen, Jingzhou Prefecture Yamen, the Ministry of Justice, and the Dali Temple came one after another, sending messengers to the door in turn to pass on messages. In the past year, the Tang family did not have so many guests. It's not a good thing for these Yamen to come to the Tang family. Either the Tang family invaded other people's fields and shops, or committed murders and injured people, or bullied the market and disturbed public order. These are not big cases, and they are all old cases. Before, No Yaman would dare to trouble the Tang family because of these matters. It was precisely because no one dared to look for her before that all the troubles came to her door today. Tang Zhao had just finished his trip to the criminal department and returned from the Ping'an County Yamen. Before he had time to drink tea, someone from the Jingzhou Mansion Yamen came again. He picked up the teapot and took a sip. He looked at the sullen Tang Chi and said, "Dad, people from Ping'an County government will come later. Remember to ask the accountant to pay them 100 taels of silver. I used to smash other people's shops, but now I have to lose money." "You bastard," Tang Chi glared at him and said, "you were not responsible for any of the troubles in the Tang family these past 2 days. Dad, this is your fault." Tang Zhao put down the teapot and said, "No one is a saint, and no one can make mistakes. It's not too late to make up for it. I did a lot of wrong things in the past, but not at that time. Are you young? Who didn't make mistakes when they were young? Don't think I don't know. Dad, when you were young, you were even more of a bastard than me. Not only did you occupy people's land, commit crimes, and hurt people, but you also made several girls pregnant." Tang Chi said angrily, "You bastard, what did you say?" Tang Zhao shrank back and said, "You can't blame me for these things. If they don't want to mess with the Tang family, no matter how many mistakes I make, the government will never come after the Tang family. If they want to mess with the Tang family, if I step out with my left foot first, they will say that I have violated the law. In the final analysis, it is you who have offended the people you should not have offended, and the main responsibility lies with you, not me." Tang Chi's chest rose and fell, pointing at him, and said angrily, "Get out." Tang Zhao looked at him and said, "Dad, we are all scholars, can you please stop being so vulgar?" Tang Chi didn't want to look at him anymore, closed his eyes, gritted his teeth and said, "Please get out, right now, right now."